Greetings, everyone. We're the Sons. My name's Scott. I'm a pastor at Bethany. This is Heather, licensed marriage and family therapist. And we're here tonight for an exciting evening, something we've not really done before as a church, but we're excited about bringing you something called Essentials of Relational Health. And our hope over these next 3 sessions is that we'd be able to build relationships, build marriages. And often we start with the why. Why this? Why now? And as leaders of the church, as people committed to relationships in our community, we know that this has been a rough time for people. And we hear over and over again, hey, there's a lot of resources out there, but my marriage is really struggling and we're feeling really alone. And so Heather and I have been praying and preparing and looking forward to spending the evening with you to just build you up and that your relationship would be strengthened in a lot of really baby steps of just actual talking, listening, connecting one to another.
Mm-hmm. We're so glad you guys are here. We know how hard it is to create time, to carve out time, especially right now. We have our own kids off and away and entertained, hopefully, for this next chunk of time in order to be with you. We care so much about relationships. Scott and I both have such a passion for keeping relationships strong, and we know how hard that is. And we're going to share little bits of our story and some of our challenges. But I want to welcome you tonight, today, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're joining us, and just say thank you from the get-go for making the time, because your relationship truly makes an impact on our entire culture. When we have strong marriage bonds, we have strong families and strong societies. And what we want to share with you is just some really essential highlights of some of the many marriage seminars that Scott and I have taught over the course of our 21-year marriage. We've been with thousands of couples and taught hundreds of hours of relationship courses together. And so this night together is going to be a pared down version of some of the essentials that we've taught over the years. Week 1, we're going to teach about tonight to have and to hold, the vow of knowing and being known. So we're looking at our wedding vows in these next 3 weeks together and thinking about what are these essentials that really we say from the beginning of our marriage, to know and be known. We're going to talk about what does it really mean to cultivate a meaningful relationship. It's what everybody wants, and yet it feels elusive and it can escape us, especially in times of stress and tension. So we're going to talk about that tonight, week 1. Week 2 is till death to us part. And this is the vow of not giving up in the face of conflict. The other thing Scott and I hear the most is, how do we deal with conflict? How do we communicate well? And it's more than just having good communication tips and strategies. We're really going to walk you through the essentials of reconciliation, of working through to the end of conflict, to where both people feel better and your relationship is actually stronger because of it. And then in week 3, we're going to look at to love and to cherish. And this is the vow of building a meaningful life together. It's, again, when we look to the future, when we look to the meaning that we make together, this is the glue that binds us for the long haul. And so these are the essentials. We'll break them down. We'll go deep. We'll share some fun and laughter, hopefully along the way, and give you some time to really connect.
The format of each one of our sessions is going to be pretty simple. We're going to start with a teaching block that's 20-ish minutes of us just kind of sharing around these concepts that Heather just outlined. And then we're going to give you time to practice. And there'll be about a 15-minute exercise time where we'll bring up some words and a timer, and you're going to actually turn to one another and practice some of the skills that we've been teaching. And then we'll come back together and wrap up and encourage you. We'll also give you some homework for the week. So the idea would be like an interactive date night, that you'll actually get to practice what you preach, that you actually get some time to connect one to another. Times of crisis, you're not able to get out and go to restaurants and travel. And so, hey, we've been sitting at home. Let's work on us. And the hope would be that the skills that you'll practice over these next 3 sessions would carry you through in times of conflict and in times of peace to keep building a marriage that lasts, a marriage that's essential.
Mm-hmm. So week 1, let us begin. To have and to hold. And this vow of knowing and being known is one of the marriage essentials that we've learned over the years is super important for keeping us connected. Whether you're a newlywed couple just starting out, whether you've been married for many, many years, we've worked with couples all across the board. Things can get hard along the way. Whether it was dreamy from the beginning or things were a little rocky. right now, in this time and place, we want to create space for you. We know that many marriages are experiencing conflict and tension and just feeling the stress of life right now. And so how do we talk about that? How do we navigate that in a way that keeps us feeling known and connected and knowing the other?
And I'd say it's a lot easier to teach someone else to do it than to practice. So here we are. We just celebrated on Friday evening. We celebrated 21 years. Yay for us. And you could go back and we could tell you stories of vacations and highs and social media posts, and it all looks really easy. And the truth is, it's been really hard at times, specific times where we literally were looking at each other saying, who is this person I'm married to? I mean, I think of a specific time where we were married about 7 years, and we had an easier time at the beginning of our marriage, but during this like 6-7 year mark, it was just rough. We were remodeling a home. I was stressed out financially with work stuff, and I was in a graduate program, and Heather was pregnant. And every time she'd get pregnant, she would turn to me like, hey, you're my person. I need more support. And I would do this, all right, I'm gonna go work harder. I'm gonna go remodel a house. I'm gonna go just trying my best to provide for her, kind of missing the mark actually quite often. And so we were remodeling this house in Seattle, and I remember specifically, we were upstairs, drywall ripped out, walls reframed. It was a mess, and I was working really, really hard for this future that was going to be more picture perfect. But we were in the middle of it and felt so hard. And Heather came up, and she was looking at the way that I had laid out the electrical boxes as we rewired this room. And I felt so criticized.
Well, let me interject here because this gets at what we're going to talk about later. But I walked up with the intention of connecting with him. I felt pretty lonely. I remember specifically thinking, oh, I've missed him. He's been working hard all day. I'm going to go up and spend some time togetgether.
And that's not what I heard.
That's not what came out of my mouth.
No, but it's just so funny because
what came out of my mouth was something critical.
Yeah.
I noticed that he had been working so hard and came in the room, but I also noticed that maybe I wasn't quite welcome, and maybe he was anticipating the tension that existed between us. And so rather than saying, hey, you're doing a great job, or thanks so much, I felt the tension, and I looked around the room, and I found something to criticize him, and it was a dumb outlet situation.
To be fair to
the
her,
outlet doesn't matter.
The outlet wasn't even at the right level, so she was completely correct. But it's amazing when your marriage starts to get in this place of conflict, you start anticipating worst case scenarios. And I remember during that time, I remember laying in our bed, going to bed, and like literally rolling over and looking at the wall and feeling so alone, and feeling like, well, who is this person I married? And she's critical, and it's rough. And it's amazing how you can start at such a place of strength, and then things start to be working against the intimacy of your marriage. And if you're not careful, you kind of lose the glue that holds you together. And we had to do a lot of work coming out of that. And it wasn't the only hard time, if I'm honest. 21 years, a number of hard times. And we'll talk about them in these sessions. We want to be very real and vulnerable. Our passion is building marriages up. We have zero desire to look like the couple that has done it perfectly all the time. We haven't. We've missed a lot. The secret of great relationship isn't always doing it perfectly. It's turning back towards one another and rebuilding the bridge to each other.
Yeah, and that's just a great example that Scott just shared. The core that we're going to teach you tonight is this idea that we get stuck in patterns of disconnection when we're not feeling close. And that example just laid it out perfectly, because when we feel disconnected, we go to sort of our primal states of being. And our primal states of being are called our primary emotions. Our primary emotions are rooted in just the basic foundations of how we're feeling. And what often we show to another person is a secondary emotion. And I'll unpack that a little bit. Our primary emotions, there's 7 basic primary emotions: anger, contempt, fear, disgust, happiness, sadness, and surprise. And those core emotions aren't so much important that you have to memorize but what I want you to know about those is those are typically the most essential emotions that you carry, and are typically softer emotions. Not always. Sometimes we feel like a primary anger, but typically these are softer emotions. And so to protect ourselves from those softer emotions, we typically gravitate to secondary emotions or protective emotions. And that's where you see the dynamic that Scott and I just talked about in that one argument came out that was protective. Another way of saying it, it's like fight or flight. When you are feeling like you're not close with your partner, which is the most important thing to a human being, by the way, is to feel loved and to feel close, this idea of knowing and being known. And when that is threatened, we go into primal states of being, just like any animal. We go into fight or flight. And fight looks like a pursuit of connection, a pursuit of we've got to work this out, a pursuit of getting through the conflict. That's one way of being that to survive the disconnection. The other way of being is to flee, to run, to shut down. And this is the withdrawing way of surviving the sense of disconnection. And as that argument that Scott and I illustrated points out, I was the pursuer. He was the withdrawer. The withdrawer is saying, it doesn't make sense to be in conflict. I want to shut this down. We're not getting anywhere. You can see how both sides, neither is good or bad, right or wrong. It's just ways of surviving. And that secondary emotion is what comes out. The secondary emotion says, you're doing it wrong. You don't see me. We don't feel connected. So I'm going to go after you and dig at you to get your attention riled up, right? And the secondary emotion that Scott was showing, for example, as a withdrawer in that is, I don't want to be around you. I don't want to see you. It was a protective withdrawal to keep us from arguing more. Now, one triggers the other, right? You can see how this plays out. And it becomes what in the world of emotionally focused therapy calls it, the type of research coming out of Sue Johnson and many others, is this cycle of disconnection. And we get really stuck in those patterns. And most couples experience this dynamic. Every now and then, you might be a couple who's a pursue couple or a withdraw. But most of the time, there's a pursuer and a withdrawer, and you're getting stuck in cycles of disconnection.
Yeah, we're going to talk. Session 2 is all about conflict because this is like core. Rebuilding connection and how do we regulate conflict are two sides of the same coin. But you know, as a pastor, I care deeply that people are able to connect with God and connect with others. As a marriage and family therapist, Heather's the same, but she's helping people connect with each other. There's in the book of Romans, Paul writes this. He says, "Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good and with God." And that overcoming is obviously a verb, that we're meant to be living a life of action where our values move from our head to our heart, to our hands, to our feet, that we're living beings, that we're living out. You know, I say oftentimes, like if your marriage feels significant because you have a piece of jewelry, you're missing it. You know, you're missing, like we're working towards building a better relationship. Think about when you were dating or courting. Almost everyone had this, you know, great stories of their dating life where they really were pursuing more depth and getting to know each other and long walks and romantic things. And then often when real life sets in and marriage sets in, for some people it's like, man, we've drifted, we've missed each other. As a pastor, it's like, yeah, love God and love people. That's what Jesus says. Those are the great commandments. And those are verbs. Those are actions to take. And so it's super hard because in that pursue-withdraw dynamic that Heather just laid out, oftentimes we want a partner that does it our way. So when I start withdrawing, I'm like, whoa, I wish she wasn't angry or pursuing. I wish she was a little bit more like me. And we start to live in our head and we start to be really proud. If I'm honest, it becomes an idol. Oh, if my partner was just different, or if they wouldn't, you know, pursue like that or withdraw like that, or if they did this and pretty soon, like, you know, we're missing this calling to actually pursue the love that God gave us and how we're trying to work towards a better relationship. And how you do that is emotional connection. This is hard for me actually, because I can preach and do a lot of, you know, I like to speak about my words, but I'm a doer and sometimes my own emotions can feel difficult to me. But it's striking to me that so much of the scriptures is God connecting with us as emotional beings. There's this whole book of poetry in the Old Testament, Lamentations, where the writers are crying out to God, or the Psalms themselves, which were deeply interactive, where God could hear the emotions of people, and people were called to pour those emotions out to God and build better relationships with each other. And so as we're practicing living a better love story, of practicing what are the essentials of us having an emotional connection, we actually are like living out our values of being people trying to love well.
Mm-hmm. And this stuff is hard for all of us. I mean, Scott is being, very humble and saying that emotions are hard for him sometimes. They can be hard for all of us. It's hard for us to name our emotions. It's hard for us to know how we feel. But if there's one thing you take away from tonight, the emotional connection you have is the bond of your relationship. And the more you understand that and get in touch with that, the stronger you're going to be. And what we've learned over the years is that all of this is rooted in what's attached to attachment research. Attachment research talks about the primary bonds that make us feel that we can trust the world that we live in is going to take care of us. The partner that we have is going to take care of us. And oftentimes we talk about kids needing secure attachment and how important that parent-child relationship is in early bonding. And then somehow along the way, the misnomer of that we grow up and we need to become self-sufficient and independent people. And then we're supposed to get married and become one and somehow serve one another and love one another. And that kind of goes at odds with what our culture is telling us. And what happens is many of us says, well, I'm not going to need you. I'm not going to be needy with you. Or they fear some sort of dependency or enmeshment or codependency. And what we want to tell you tonight is it's so important to feel a healthy dependency on each other and to cultivate safety around that attachment to one another. What we've learned, in fact, is that couples who have a strong attachment and have strong bonds actually live longer. They have they have better health and well-being. There's less instances of heart attacks. There's all kinds of really amazing physiological health resources and research that just proves that being in love and being in a long-term relationship is better for our well-being.
Yeah, I'm sometimes humbled by the fact that as a church, we spend a lot of time counseling couples before they get married. And then we kind of launch couples into the world and think it's going to be easy. And many couples that I run into, they just say like, yeah, we've drifted. And I think that's true. Like most marriages that I know that fall apart, it's not a cataclysmic decision of infidelity or abuse. Those things happen. And if that's your story, I'm sorry, I'm with you on this. But my experience, my limited experience, is that most marriages that I see drift apart, it's not the one behavior that somebody did that's unforgivable. It's hundreds of missed connections, thousands of days where I don't feel known and I don't feel cared for, and a loneliness sets in where I feel adrift from the person who I had asked to be married with and spend my life with, and now I just feel really alone. And so like Heather's saying, what we're pressing in towards to have a godly relationship is this healthy dependence where we're leaning definitely on the Lord and praying together and going to church together, reading scriptures together, but we're leaning on each other. Listen to what Ecclesiastes 4 says. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls, that one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, two can resist him. And then this famous verse that often gets preached at a lot of Christian weddings: a cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. And if you're feeling right now like, man, I'm down to my, the end of my rope, or I'm down to my last thread, or I definitely don't feel like a 3-stranded cord, we are here in this session to encourage you and to offer you hope, because we've seen hundreds of couples start to do the slow, painful, tedious work of rebuilding connection and a 3-stranded cord of rewoven in their life. Even if things have been really, really bad, I really want to encourage you that a healthy relationship is often one conversation away to say, like, we can be different. Let's start to work back towards each other.
Some really cool research that has come out of this work of emotionally focused therapy. One is this fMRI study that is pretty famous in the world of emotionally focused therapy. But a couple comes in who've been disconnected, haven't been getting along, and has volunteered to participate. And what they do is they put one member of the couple into an fMRI machine to show radio imaging of their brain and how their brain responds to pain. And so they begin by shocking the person's toes, lightly enough that it doesn't cause any damage, but they can feel the pain, and the pain lights up in the pain sensors in their brain. And so they do this a couple of times to make sure the machine works and they're feeling the pain, and they say, yes, I feel that pain. And the interesting thing is that they then go away and they do some couples counseling, and they get reconnected emotionally. And some of the things we're going to teach you over these next few weeks, they really become to master this relational connection and this emotional connection. And once they're back on track with each other, the interesting thing is they bring that same person back in, put them in the fMRI machine, shock their toes, and yep, their brain lights up with pain. And so then what they do is they bring their partner in to hold their hand. And when they bring their partner in, once they've reconciled and reconnected, to hold their hand, and then they shock their toes again, their brain barely lights up. Pain is registering, pain is going through their body. The shock happened, the pain is the same, but holding the hand of somebody you love literally buffers you from the pain that you experience in the world. And think of the ramifications of that emotionally. Think about when you're heading into a hard day, when you're struggling with your parenting, or you're worried about something. To know that you have somebody in your corner. This is obviously what we have with God every single day, and this is the Holy Spirit's presence and Jesus' guidance in our life. And to have a partner on that journey, to know this person is in my corner, is truly amazing. Couples that were even, in another study, they had little wounds put on their hands. And when there was tension, couples that rated themselves as having disconnection and tension, the wounds took longer to heal than the people who had a close and connected relationship. Your immune system functions better. It's really pretty incredible what happens when you have the strength and resilience. And that's the word that we want to encourage you with too, is it's not having it all together. It's not having all the answers. I literally remember years ago, a couple that I was working with, and the man said, just give me the script. Just give me the script and I'll say all the right things. And his heart was there, but yet the tone and the emotion weren't quite there. And those needed to align, because we can have a script and we can have all the answers. But if we don't have a sense of that strong emotional bond, we will get off track. And we want to be on track with resilient love stories.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things you're talking that really popped out. One, that fMRI study is so powerful, and someone holding the hand and how they're able to be buffered from pain. And I think it's important for me to say, it's like, I haven't always done that really well. I haven't always been that one that's held your hand. I've been working, I've been busy, I've been, kind of stuck in my own head. But when we've been at our best, we've been committed to being each other's person, to say, how was work today? How are the kids today? Just really saying, like, I can't do this perfectly, but I can be present to you. And the connection that's come through that. And, I forget the writer, but that, seminal book, No Man is an Island, No Human is an Island. I think it's an idol in our culture today, where we hunger for such radical independence. Certainly I see it in the church. We see it in relationships. But healthy relationship is saying, like, I can't exist alone. I need you. You're the one that I ask God to bring into my life, and that we would be this three-stranded cord. And so as we practice showing up for one another and being there for one another and reconnecting, we're leaning into that primary calling that on our wedding day we said, hey, yeah, I'll take that vow. And just, I think we've said this twice. I'm going to say it another time because it's really important. It's like, I imagine if you're watching this at home or on your computer or whatever else, it's like, oh, well, they don't know our story. They don't know how much you hurt me or how hard that thing was we faced, and we don't. But I just want to encourage you, wherever you are, no one is perfect. I literally have not met a perfect human couple. Some might look like they do it perfectly because they have a podcast or TV show or whatever else. But to be human and to love others is to make mistakes, is to fail to show up at times, is to be selfish. We are sinners saved by God's grace. And so when we show up to one another, we get to practice confessing and practice grace of like, hey, yeah, we're gonna stay in this. We're gonna work through this. And so I just really, really want to encourage you as we go into the exercise time, which is coming soon, to show up and to be non-defensive and to hunger for God to make you into the couple that you asked him to make you, whether that was months ago or years ago. In all of our marriage conferences, it's always interesting because sometimes there's pre-engaged couples there or engaged couples, all the way up to people that have been married for 50 years. And these couples have something to teach each other because at some level, yes, marriage gets easier the further along you go, but there's something about young love that has something to teach it too, and its desire to turn towards one another. So wherever you're working on your relationship during this session, be encouraged. Like it's good work you're setting out to do.
Mm-hmm. And all of this is rooted in our faith. When we look at the stories that are in the Bible, we see a trajectory of dependency, of connection, of turning toward a God who is there for us. And it's a design for our relationships too. When it's kind of the upside down philosophy of the more dependent in a functional and a healthy way, the happier we are. The more we serve one another, the stronger our relationship becomes. And it's not that we have it all together. And in fact, I can't tell you how many times people will say, well, you guys have it all together because we teach this stuff. And as Scott has said, and I will concur, we don't. We've had many hard times, and we've had points where we are on the brink of saying, are we all done? Is this not worth it anymore? It's gotten that bad. And I'll spare you from the gory story on that. But to tell you, we've been there and we've put the hard work in. And I can promise you that these are the skills that put into practice can create a resilient love story. And I absolutely attest to God's Holy Spirit power in us to work in and through us to create a love story that can last forever if we put that time and that work and that effort towards loving each other well. When we look at the cycle of dysfunction, when we look at what it means to be a pursuer and a withdrawer, when we look at when we get stuck in those patterns that I described earlier, this is what we really want you to think about tonight. Who are you in the relationship? Are you the person who typically says, I want to work this out, I'm coming after you, and you notice at times maybe when things get tense or you feel really withdrawn or your partner's withdrawn, that you might tend towards being more critical, you might get louder, the pursuit starts to get a little ugly. And again, this is normal because you're doing it to fight for your love and your bond, even though you recognize that it's edging on dysfunctional. Or maybe your partner's telling you that what you're doing is dysfunctional. It's not working for you, but you're trying. So maybe that's you. Maybe you're the pursuer. On the other side of it, maybe you identify more with being a withdrawer. Maybe when things get heated, you shut down. You shut down, you flee, you withdraw. You might literally walk out of the room, hang up the phone, shut down the conversation, or it might just be an internal experience. John Gottman calls this flooding, where you shut down internally and your partner probably sees it and knows it, and you kind of go away from the discussion in that way. Again, it's not working for you, but you do it to survive, and you do it out of your best intentions to make the conflict go away. So first and foremost, we want you to think about who are you in the relationship. That's the first step to getting out of this vicious cycle that keeps you stuck.
I want to say both are okay. Because they're who God made you to be. So if you're withdrawing, it's because you love the relationship so much, you respond in such a way to protect the relationship. And if you're pursuing, it's because you love the relationship so much that you're going to go out and fight for that thing that you know needs to be said or named or whatever else. And so this has been really hard for me in 21 years of marriage, to be quite honest, to actually say both sides of this are two parts of people trying to work towards a better relationship. So don't demonize one or the other. They're how you've existed to get to this point, and both are okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're getting ready to send you into an exercise time. And as Scott described earlier, we want to give you a chunk of time to take about 10 or 15 minutes to have the conversation right here and right now. Because we know lives are busy, and we know that if we say to do this later, it might not happen. And so we literally want to send you out. We'll have some music playing in the background. The questions will stay on the screen. Have the conversation together right here, right now. And then we'll come back together and have a recap. So to launch you into that time, step one is, who are you in the cycle? Are you the pursuer or the withdrawer? And just talk a little bit about what that's like to be you in the relationship. And again, I love how Scott said it. There's no right, no wrong. There's no need to argue about this. There might even be some laughter. I know when Scott and I first learned about this, we laughed. How do they know who we are? And I will literally tell you, every single couple that I've worked with over my 20 years of doing therapy will say, how do you know us? And this is the research that comes out of emotionally focused therapy. So it's human and it's normal. So talk about who you are in the relationship, pursuer, withdrawer, number one. And then two, I talked a little bit earlier about primary and secondary emotional states. And so what I want you to do second is to say, in those times of pursue and withdraw, when we're in our cycle, here's the secondary emotion that I show you. And here's the primary emotion that I'm generally feeling. Now, this is a bit of a stretch, and this is something that usually takes many weeks of therapy. So I just want to encourage you with this idea, and we're going to send you out and have you practice some more over the week. But what this means is a secondary emotion. A great example of this is earlier this week, there was the dishwasher was open, and I stubbed my toe on the dishwasher. And everybody knows how bad it feels when you stub your toe. And what I was feeling in my body was pain, and I wanted to cry. That was primary. That was my primary emotion, my pain and wanting to cry. My protective secondary emotion came out, and I was angry and looking for somebody to blame. Who left the dishwasher open? I'm going after somebody. Because I'm in pain, my protective secondary emotion kicks in to protect me from that pain, and it happens that fast. And it especially happens that fast when we're with our partner and we feel that sense of rejection or withdrawal. And so primary emotions are typically, I feel like you don't see me right now. I feel so alone in our relationship. I feel sad that we haven't talked in a while. That's a primary emotional statement. Secondary might be, and I just criticized you for me a pursuer, or I just looked for a fault in you, or I came after you with something really stressful because I wanted you to respond with urgency in order to invite you back to me. That's the secondary that I do. Do you want to speak about your...
Yeah, no, I think for me, sometimes the secondary, it's not even emotion, but just busyness or withdrawal. I just get quiet because the primary emotion might be sadness. So if I'm dealing with something at work, a hard relationship, a hard couple that I'm counseling, or a situation that I'm really just kind of carrying as a pastoral responsibility, I might show the secondary thing where I either look busy and I'm out just trying to do all the yard work, or I just get really quiet. But underneath that is a more raw emotion, often of sadness. And so I show like, oh, I don't want to talk about anything. But what actually is there is a fear or a sadness that then if I'm honest about, obviously keeping situations anonymous, but just say, hey, I'm going through this hard thing, then you're not just like, oh, he's out mowing the yard for the second hour of the afternoon. He actually cares to show me what's going on. So.
Yeah. So your primary emotion and the secondary reactivity, just name it in sort of an average everyday argument, or if that feels hard, think of a specific time when you got in a cycle recently and just name what you were feeling in that moment. And it can be specific if that's more helpful. And then third, what we want you to do is talk about what would be the antidote to that pursue or withdraw dynamic. For you as a pursuer, what do you need in that moment to be less reactive to create the dance and the cycle? What could your partner do or show you or see you in some way? That idea of knowing and being known, the vow that we talked about, to have and to hold. What could your partner do to be there for you in that moment? For me as a pursuer, sometimes I just need to know that Scott's listening or that he cares about what I'm feeling. And so I need him to reassure me in some way. He might be able to say, hey, I can tell you're angry right now, or I feel like you're criticizing me right now, but I want you to know I really care about what you're feeling. Sometimes that's really soothing for me and helps me to get to that primary emotion quicker. For a withdrawer, you might have something like, to be able to tell your partner, I need you to be less critical right now, or I need you to have less anger in this moment. So if you could soften, John Gottman talks about this idea of a softened startup, that when you approach an argument in a softer, gentler way, you're more likely to get to a solution. And John Gottman comes out of the University of Washington and does a lot of great relationship research. But that softened startup is something we can all take into account. So a withdrawer might say, what I need in a moment to stay engaged in the conversation is for your tone to soften. And I know for me at times when I'm in that divided state, when I feel like I'm in fight or flight, my emotions feel big and they feel so important. And for me to hear that and to know he's there for me, he's not going anywhere, he's not going to withdraw, it's easier for me to soften. And so in the same way that we get stuck in the vicious cycle, when we're able to unwind and to act into these ways that really honor and care for the other, we can get into the opposite cycle, which earlier I was thinking is some work in the beginning, but eventually becomes its own perpetuating cycle. And you'll get there quicker because you'll know that feeling and you'll know how to do it. And it's a really wonderful way to get back on track.
So exercise, you'll have some time, lean in, reconnect, and we'll see you soon.
Hey, welcome back, and good job. I'm sure that we have all across the gamut of what that experience was like. For some of you, you maybe just dialed it in, and this was a great discussion, and you learned a lot about each other, and kudos to you. For many of us, this is a hard beginning, and sometimes just bringing these things up can invite conflict sometimes, and that's okay, and that's really normal. And we're going to give you a chance to keep working on this, keep cultivating this. This is the beginning of resilience. Stepping into the difficulty, stepping into vulnerability actually is the stepping stone towards more connection and more resilience in a relationship. And so we just want to give you encouragement that this is just the beginning of a lifelong journey of reconnecting and feeling close.
Yeah, one of the things that when we're not at our best, I can start to idealize other people's relationship. Often, social media posts like, "Why aren't we like them? They're in Maui, 4 times a year. Why aren't we like this couple or whatever?" And we start to make an idol out of other people's relationships. And obviously, everyone struggles, and the relationship we show to the world often doesn't have the real grit of what's going on. And so I just want to encourage you that you're in the relationship that God has put you in, that you have chosen. And so to work hard at cultivating intimacy with the one you're with. And I was at a conference one time, and I heard the speaker, just talk about how if we're in a season of life where we're constantly saying the grass is greener to a different partner, a different relationship, living in a different city, maybe with different kids, like if you're living a different story where the grass is always greener, it's time to water your own grass. And what I take that to mean is, don't live someone else's story. Don't live someone else's relationship. Put the work in and say sorry where you need to say sorry. Show up of like, hey, let's talk tomorrow night, and turn the TV off and reconnect. And really cultivate this life of being a 3-stranded cord with God at your center, and really digging in and building a better love story with the one you're with.
That reminds me of many of the couples that I've worked with. When you tell about your love story, when you talk about the beginning of how you met and what drew you together, it's really neat to hear about people telling those beginning stories, or working with newlyweds who are in that stage themselves. And across the board, what people say is, they knew everything about me. And when they say they knew everything, or I could tell them everything, when you get to that point in your relationship where it's like, I've told them everything, what we mean by that is we've told them the hard stuff. We've told them the not so pretty stuff, and they still want to stick around. And across the board, we all as humans think that's pretty cool, because what connects us is our vulnerability. What connects us is those places of weakness where we can move towards each other with comfort and care and grace. And isn't this the pursuit of Jesus? He loves us because of grace, not because of our performance. And if we can cultivate that kind of love in our relationship, it's a beautiful mystery that's what draws us close to each other.
Yeah, and that is the biblical story, where God's favorite people weren't the ones that always got it right. They're just the ones that kept showing up and saying, God, make me more and more into your image. I think of David, I think of Peter. There are many others that, like, their failures didn't define them. Their commitment to Christ and to living life on mission defined them. And that's what God can do when we're hungry to reconnect and recommit, and to say, like, let's get better together.
It's this beautiful mystery of trying hard, trying our very best, because we are so loved. Because we are so loved, we can offer huge amounts of grace, and we also want to live into our best selves. And that's the beautiful mystery that keeps us on track. What we want to send you out with this week, until we see you again, is to keep having this discussion of your cycle. What is your dance with one another that you typically do? When you can name that and notice that, that's the first step to unwinding that stuck place. And so first and foremost, just notice when it happens. When you notice you're in it. Some couples like to come up with a name for this, but you can just say, we're in it. We're in our dance. We're in our cycle. Some will call it the vortex. Some will call it the black hole, or we're in that stuck place. Just something to cue. Some even have to use hand signals. We're in it. Typically a withdrawer might say, hand signal, we're in our cycle. Name that you're in it, And if you can get to that second thing that I shared with you, this is what's happening for me. The primary emotion I'm feeling is I feel rejected, I feel alone, I feel criticized, I'm so sad right now. Oftentimes what we're feeling might have nothing to do with our partner. I can say oftentimes I'm in a vulnerable place, maybe because something at work or the way I parented my kids, or I'm feeling sad or guilt or shame about something else, and I can take it out on my partner. And so when I can identify, say, oh, I had a rough day and I'm actually feeling so alone that I really need you. And so primary emotion, naming the secondary reactivity. And then finally, if you can take it to this next level, and it's okay if you can't, but I'm going to put it all in your toolbox for you to think about, is to say what you need in that moment. What I need from you in this moment is just some reassurance. I did have a rough day, or I really blew it with you, and I'm wondering if we're okay. We've been fighting a lot. This is a stressful time. Are we going to make it? I'm scared. I could use some reassurance. Or a withdrawer might say, I need to take a little break. I would love for your voice to soften. I'm feeling threatened right now. And then they can re-engage in the conversation too. Those are some examples. It'll be unique for you. You know yourself the best. So we want to encourage you to get really good at sharing the good stuff, the emotional connection that is the glue for your relationship.
And I'm about to pray for you. I want to add one thing to your homework this week. If you would be so bold, I want to give you homework to pray with each other for your relationship every day. With each other for your relationship every day. It scares me and grieves me that so many couples don't pray out loud. And so just to ask your partner, how can I be praying for you? And to both of you share, and then to bring those requests to God. Try to do that every day, even if it feels hard. What's not okay is to say, Lord, just make my partner different. Or, don't use prayer as being passive aggressive. Just pray with each other every day for your relationship. Mm-hmm. Let me pray for you now. Jesus, thank you so much for the couples that are listening and watching and considering how to strengthen their marriage, how to strengthen their relationship. And Jesus, we bring their relationship before you. We pray that they would show up and turn towards each other and be able to name their cycle and get into a place where they would share the emotions that are going on, and they would turn towards one another. God, would you allow them freedom to express hurt and grace for each other? And like we said, God, oftentimes marriages don't fall apart in a moment, but in hundreds of interactions. And so can you give these couples just a week ahead of turning towards each other, and a new renewed commitment to strengthening the bond, the three-stranded cord that you long to weave in their lives. We love you, Jesus. Thank you for loving us. In your name we pray. Amen.
And a little teaser for next week. We're going to talk about fighting, conflict, forgiveness, reconciliation. This is the meat. We want to see you. We want you to have this information. I promise you it will be life-changing.